seeks to broaden our understanding of ethics and human nature, and our congregational community encourages us to share diverse opinions, friendship, and camaraderie. We welcome everybody to share in our journey. If you would like more information about our community, please let me or one of our, please let me know after the platform. We also have a visitor's book where you can sign in, and there are some literature available for you. Or you can also ask Chris here or any of the other board members like Jan and Gretchen, and they will be most happy to give you the information. We are a community and we take time now to share joys and concerns. So any joys and concerns? Go ahead, Mike.
I was in Arizona the last couple of weeks or more, and I missed the alcohol. So that's something I want to try. This is the first time I tried.
Did we record that program, Chris? No? Okay. We also, yeah. Did you bring in the wine? Okay. So you can make up for missing the talk. No, today is not the wine alcohol talk. Any other joys? Yes, Ralph?
My joy is that I moved back to my house.
Oh. So you're still moving your things out?
Well, I'm pretty much moving it.
Yeah, it's a big change. You've stayed in that house for what, 40, 50 years? The program, okay. Now we'll have Mary. Yes. Oh, please, go ahead. Go on.
If anyone is looking for an alternative Thanksgiving dinner, then what they're planned. There is at the Quinoa River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Every year they have a potluck Thanksgiving. People that I think they're really.
This is the one on Garrett Road. Any other joys or concerns? All right, then Mary will give us the opening words.
So Dorothy was
Mary?
Yeah. Oh, I thought there was no mic.
No, well, that is for the.
Oh. Okay. So what do I do with this? So, okay. So,
On off, it's on.
okay. I haven't done this before, so bear with me. Okay, so this is a piece called I Talked to a Lady, and it's written by Tanya Howden, who was the daughter of a mother with dementia in the United Kingdom. Okay. I talked to a lady yesterday. She didn't know my name. She was amazed to hear about my past and the places I had been. Her daughter's life, so similar, filled her with awe and fear. She looked at me bewildered. Could this really be real? We talked about her family. We talked about her past. We talked about the folks she'd known, their walk, their talk, their cheer, the ones who floated through her world and those who stopped to share. We talked about the future, her hopes, her dreams, her fears. We talked about her sorrows, all the sadness life threw in. We talked about her children, some things I shouldn't hear. We giggled and cried and laughed at a life so rich, so full, and in a moment shared, sat in silence with our thoughts. And I whispered, "Good night, Mother," as her eyes succumbed to dreams. I talked to a lady today. She didn't know my name. She was amazed to hear about my past and the places I had been. Her daughter's life, so similar, filled her with awe and fear. She looked at me bewildered.
Thank you, Mary. Okay. The program this afternoon is a talk by Guy Beretich, is that the right? Beretich? On dementia and nutrients, what you need to know. Following that, there will be a question and answer session. You want to introduce the speakers?
Yeah, it's fine. Well, we're fortunate to have with us Dr. Guy Beretich. There you are. As many of you may remember, a few years ago, Guy spoke to us on his book, Brain Fuel Evolution. You may remember that the book dealt with identifying the convergence and divergence of brain fuels and brain foods over time, and explained their influence on human evolution and the advancement of civilization. Guy boasts a unique and diverse background with degrees in immunology, marine biology, veterinary sciences, and industrial chemistry. He previously managed intellectual property information, managed intellectual property for technology startups, Aphanos or Iphinos, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and Talari Networks. He currently works at Patent Forecast in Durham. So today we'll be hearing his views on dementia and nutrition as it relates to dementia. And I think we're all looking forward to hearing what he has to say. So Guy, it's all yours. You got that one, okay.
Check. Does that work? Okay. So, not sure what happened. It's locked up. All right. Might have to just shut it down a second. It's frozen. Let me try. I'm just going to reboot it.
Yeah, I think that's what you're gonna do.
I mean,
Momentary technical delay. Yeah.
all right. Okay, so that's my book with the title. So this is about work that I originally started researching brain fuels, things to fuel the brain, stuff that our brain uses to process information, mostly things that become neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine. And while I was doing that, I also, the idea came to me that, well, maybe if we know what these nutrients are and we know the foods that are high in these nutrients, we can look back and see if these foods had an effect on civilization. So I was doing that, and it did work out, and I wrote a whole book on that. The thing about it was, as I was doing that, I started learning about all these other sorts of things that go with that. And dementia is one of them, because the very same nutrients that help us to excel, when they're deficient, our brain just doesn't work, and which is dementia. So I started also making presentations on this, and I include in my book some of these same facts. So the premise, really quick, is that thinking consumes certain nutrients, and these are brain fuels. The more you have, the better the brain performs. Surges in civilizations are due to these foods. And here's what the research I found was, if you look in the scientific research as to what causes depression, there's like 13 nutrients that have been studied that said, well, we cured the depression with this, which, when you think about it, the brain is a very complicated organ, and it needs a lot of different nutrients to do its work. And its work is different from other parts of the body. So its needs are, I won't say unique, but they're a little higher in certain nutrients than others. So you look at all these things, and I think I've got 18 here. Today we're going to talk about two which aren't on, well, they're on this list, but I don't have them as in here as dementia. Choline is one of them, and it's important for, actually, you need a preconception to get these Renaissance effects. But For dementia, all you have to do is be low in choline, apparently. And the other one is going to be tryptophan, which you can see about right here, tryptophan. So we'll talk about those two today, okay? So I'll give you a little bit of background on I mix these things together that make it a little more interesting. Italian Renaissance started with, the first one was Giotto, the first artist of the Italian Renaissance. And his teacher was Cimabue on the left. And you can see sort of, hopefully you can see the difference in style and realism, ability to paint realism. But that's not what really, I think, distinguished him, although that was beautiful. What distinguished him was the ability to paint perspective. On the left, we see, this is the Byzantine style. Notice the chair it's pretty cool painting, actually, but it's not realistic. And back then, people wanted realism. And on the right is a painting by Giotto in Padua. It's a mural where you can see it's more realistic. His realism is not perfect, but it's way, way better than the Byzantine style and what his teacher was painting, Cimabue. So people really went bananas for what he was doing. So my thesis is, well, then something must have come into the diet before this, right? Okay, so if we look at the Renaissance, Dante and Giotto were the first two, and then some others follow. Now I threw in the bubonic plague to show you that, yeah, it did affect them. But what happened was the food that came into their diet was pasta was introduced around 1260, something like that. And then as a confirmation, there's a law by the Pope at the time, Clement IV, that he regulated pasta, which is what usually happens. Somebody brings in a new product and then the government has to regulate it, right? Because there's knockoffs, instead of putting eggs, they'd put yellow dye in there or whatever. So it happened, this pasta was introduced and this was special pasta. You say, well, the Italians have always had pasta, but that's not true. This was egg noodles, which is different than just your regular pasta. Okay, and that's because the eggs have a very important nutrient in them, which is choline, which we'll talk about today for dementia. Okay, so Marco Polo was believed to have brought it, but he did not. It was his dad and his uncle that brought it. That's the date. So I'd like to put that myth to rest. All right, so, well, what's so special about Tuscany though? Everybody could get this pasta, but what's so special? Well, it happens to be at the intersection of three important ecosystems. A cattle country in the north, a cold sea, and an olive region. And the reason for that is very simply, remember those 18 nutrients that I showed you? To get them in abundance, you are probably not going to find one ecosystem or maybe even two that has all those nutrients in abundance. So you needed to have this triple ecosystem, this conjunction of ecosystems. This repeats itself in other places that have had a boom, like ancient Greece, with all the philosophers that came out. And also later in France, starting in like the 18th and 19th century, because they have all ecosystems, but then with industrialization, they connected with the railroads, and were able to ship stuff around. Today, with globalization, we can do exactly the same thing, and we are doing it, right? Except we've been given some bad advice. We'll see. Okay, so really quickly, it's got fuels in it. I mean, foods that have all these. And we have mozzarella cheese from cattle country that gives us tryptophan, fish, the olives, and of course, in a region that's Mediterranean climate, you can grow a lot of nice fruits and vegetables, right? And then you add this extra food, this choline, and boom, these guys were ready. They were ready to excel. Tuscany actually was one of the first places to have a democracy, along with ancient Greece. We usually just think of Greece having first democracy, that's it. But no, Tuscany actually had a system, democratic style system. Okay, So that's your Mediterranean omnivore diet. Okay. So let's talk about dementia. Okay, so I learned how to do these things, so now I like to do it. Okay, so with dementia, we have choline, which is transformed into acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter. That's a normal reaction. That's a neurotransmitter in the brain and in other places. And with Alzheimer's, we have a decrease in the cholinergic neuron activity. So this is down, okay? The brain normally recycles it. So to help with keeping the levels up, it recycles it with cholinesterase, we give a cholinesterase inhibitor, okay? So we're doing it just in a similar manner to the SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, keeping it from being recycled too fast, keeping it in there to do its job. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Right. Okay, that's our crutch. Okay, so now the problem is, well, why don't we just give more choline to the people? Well, the problem is with the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier, its function is to keep stuff out of the brain. But to do that, it also has the ability to pull things into the brain. You can't have it both ways, right? You have to be able to do both. Well, you can't have it both ways. So what's the problem is you can just give extra choline and it doesn't work. It's just not getting into the brain. So what they found out was that there was a special form of choline called alpha-glyceryl phosphorylcholine, I can't say it, and or choline alpha share. Okay, this is actually a natural form of choline. It's just in a very low concentration in the food we eat. But this form can cross the blood-brain barrier without any help, or apparently whatever's there, for some reason it can cross. So this study was done where it was a double-blind, placebo-controlled, and there was, I forget how many, but there were several hundred people in the study. So it was a full-blown study. And they gave 400 milligrams 3 times a day. So if we look at what they did at 90 days and 180 days, they gave them this test that's specific for Alzheimer's, okay, Alzheimer's symptoms. And you see the choline ones in this test, symptoms get a positive score, no symptoms, you don't get a score. So these people started out, they put them at 0 to show the difference. The placebo people started showing more symptoms of Alzheimer's, so their score went up. Whereas the people that were treated with the choline alpha share, their symptoms are going down, okay? So that's working. Now we come to another test, the mini mental state exam. Are you guys familiar with that? Probably some of you might have had this exam. It's an exam which a physician will give you. Your family physician can give you this. And it's a general screening for your mental acuity, I would say. What's that? I still didn't understand you. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So this mini mental state exam, it's a common test. I think there might be 22 or 23 questions or something like that, which your physician will give you. And it's not a hard test to do. You draw some things and stuff like that. You're familiar with it? Yeah, the intersecting polygons and stuff like that. Right, okay. So notice, all right, so in this one it improved, right? This is the reverse. If your score goes up, you're doing better. Okay, so the choline made the score go up. So let's put these two together. and look at them. And so you notice one, the people with in the Alzheimer's specific test, it's picking up the change in their symptoms. Whereas in the mini-mental exam, it's not picking it up that well. Does that make sense? So one exam is designed to pick up Alzheimer's, and it will do it. The other exam is not, and it's not doing a very good job of picking it up. But look at what happened to the people here, right? Why did their scores shoot way up? It's just good old-fashioned dementia, normal dementia, not Alzheimer's dementia, right? It improved their cognitive ability regardless of the Alzheimer's. Does that make sense? Right? Which is good news, right? So, okay. So you're going to say, now, they also showed that in tests with mice, this was with humans, with mice, that if you fed a mouse a high choline diet, most of it's for its life, and these are mice that had Alzheimer's gene. If you fed them this high choline diet, you would reduce the symptoms or the manifestations of Alzheimer's. Both, you know, they could do sections of the brain and stuff like that. So the idea then is to get more choline in your diet. So, and these are just some of the foods, you know, Coke is the highest by far, liver, tripe, chitterlings, if anybody still eats that. And then it drops off, of course. So those are the high choline diets. Now, of course, you're going to say, what is choline used for besides the brain, right? Because that's important, and this will tie in as we go. So the choline, all right, it comes right here. This is where it's going to come in. But what it does is it's important. It's the enzyme specifically for reverse cholesterol transport. Okay, so what that means is we've got cholesterol throughout our body. What this enzyme will do will swap out the fatty acid on that cholesterol and convert it from LDL to HDL. Okay, and what that does is it transport the cholesterol out of your tissues back to the liver, and it goes into the gallbladder. That's how you get cholesterol out of your body, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so that's how, that's very important. So you need it for that. Okay, but we'll talk about this paradox. So if you have a dietary deficiency of choline, you get atherosclerosis because it's not transporting, you don't have enough transport to cholesterol out of your tissues. They're going to stay there and you get atherosclerosis because it just accumulates. Does that make sense? If that's its function and you don't have it, then the cholesterol doesn't move out. Okay, so on the other hand, they also showed that in a well-controlled study, dietary choline causes atherosclerosis. All right, so that's a problem for us. It's not as simple. What's that? When you get the buildup of plaque in your arteries or arteriosclerosis. Okay. All right, and then there's the last thing though. They said, well, they've seen where if you eat eggs, which are the highest thing in choline, you actually reduce atherosclerosis. So what's going on here? Of course, I think I've already shown you that. Well, let me skip this. Okay, so what's going on here is this guy figured this out. This group, scientists, figured this out. They saw that there's choline, and then he also saw there's two related compounds which do the same thing. Bacteria in your gut are transforming it into these compounds. And it's just like they're making a drug here, which is going to block that enzyme. Because if you chop off part of a molecule, it may still fit into the enzyme, just not work. Okay, it's like a key with no handle. You can put it in there, but you can't turn it. So what these bacteria are doing is they're putting this, they're cleaving it, and then the body's making it into something, and then that goes and blocks the thing, which was pretty cool because what they did was they did this experiment, and then they saw this compound that the body finally forms, TMAO, blocks this reverse transport. But then when they added antibiotics, gave them antibiotics, it went away. So the problem here is bacteria. Okay. So then you say, well, what can we do? Well, we can emulate the French, who have the lowest level of heart disease. They also have the worst diet, right? That's right, exactly. And we get our own antibiotics, cheese and wine, okay? Cheese is if cheese didn't have an antibiotic in it, bacteria would consume the cheese, right? Wine, we know, wine has that alcohol in it, which is an antimicrobial more than an antibiotic. Also, things like miso have antibiotics in them. And then, of course, there's vinegar, which have a vinaigrette salad as opposed to a ranch, and it's better for you. Okay, so basically the system is fermented foods are antimicrobial. They have antibiotics in them. Does that scare you? Okay, now let me go back and tell you about those three compounds. So the guy that did those studies said, well, he had done it on carnitine and choline and, well, the group. I say the guy because he gave an interview on it. And he said he became a vegetarian after that because he didn't want to die of a heart attack like that. So his approach was to cut out the choline, right? But as we now know, what's that going to do? It's going to cause atherosclerosis, right? But even that, he'll say, well, I'll get my choline from somewhere else. But he can't do that. So what I did was I took and looked at the molar levels and added them together for those three compounds, choline, two related compounds, to see which food had the highest potential for giving you atherosclerosis if you have the wrong bacteria, right? If you have the wrong bacteria. And as you can see, well, you can see they're all over. I just sorted them by food groups. The highest actually, well, some of the highest is like wheat germ and wheat bran because it has betaine in it. But actually the very highest one, you know the answer, so don't get it. The very highest one is probably a food that we think is really good, nutritious for us. And it is if you don't have those bacteria in you, right? So the very highest one is actually quinoa, right? So the solution to this, in my point of view, is not to go attack the nutrient, but as in so many other diseases, go attack the bacteria, right? Just like Helicobacter pylori causes peptic ulcers and stuff like that. The solution isn't to take antacids. The solution is to get rid of the Helicobacter, right? So let's see. Which one? Quinoa. Quinoa. I'm not sure how we should say that. Okay. Now, what we do know is that periodontal disease is associated with heart disease. Why would that be? I mean, it's your teeth, right? It's not your gut. Well, I don't know, but to me, the simplest explanation is imagine like you're making bread and you mix the flour up with water, and then when it's already ready, then you throw the yeast on top. That doesn't work. You've got to mix the yeast in with the flour. So if you have periodontal disease and you're chewing your food, you are mixing those bacteria in really well. So if you happen to have the wrong bacteria in your mouth, then you're kind of in trouble, right? So there's that. So the take-home message of all this is keep your teeth clean, right? How am I doing on time? Am I fine? Okay. All right. Well, what's that? But remember, it's periodontal. It's not your tooth, right? It's the periodontal aspect, the gums, gingivitis. Okay. Let's go then to our second nutrient, tryptophan. Okay. So this is an interesting study where they took these mice, and these mice are genetically transgenic mice with 5 Alzheimer's genes. And they start getting Alzheimer's symptoms at 2 months of age. So if you didn't think the genes were important, this really proves it. These guys, they get Alzheimer's fast, early and bad, right? So that's actually good news. We know what genes are responsible, right? So these guys took these mice, and they gave them this special diet, which they had found, and it's a Japanese company that makes fermented products, and they happen to find these products in cheese, and it's a dipeptide, tryptophan. They tried it, there's one dipeptide, tryptophan methionine and tryptophan tyrosine. Because they both worked fine, they said, well, it must be the tryptophan. That's the thing that's constant, okay? So they fed them to those mice in the diet, and then I think at 6 months, they looked at their various tests. They looked at the tissues. Here's the brain. On the left is the one with no treatment, and on the right is the one with treatment. Now, the treatment, the dots are beta amyloid plaques that stain in the brain. Okay, so I think you can see there's a pretty big difference in the two. Okay. All right. The other thing they did was they gave these mice a test, short memory test. So in this test, what they do is they put a mouse in a square box, and in 2 corners, they put 2 identical objects. And then they drop the mouse in, and they let them stay in there, I don't know, it depends on the time, what do they say, 10 minutes, and let them familiarize themselves with both objects. Then what they do, because mice are curious creatures, when they are presented with a new object, they'll go look at that instead of the familiar object because they want to know the new stuff, right? So they pulled the mouse out for about an hour, and then they put them back in, and they've replaced one of the objects with a new object, okay? And then they leave them in there for 2 to 5 minutes, and they see which object do they go to. So if the mouse has short memory that for at least an hour or whatever, you know, however long you took them out, they'll remember the familiar object and they'll go to the unfamiliar object, right? If they don't remember, then there's a 50-50 chance they'll go one to the other, right? Okay, so what did they see? Well, they saw, these are the wild type mice, which is the ones that don't have the genes. And then these are the ones with the Alzheimer's genes. And then on the far right are Alzheimer's that were treated. And you can see that the ones that were treated reacted, went preferentially to the new object, just like the wild type would do. They behaved like normal mice, right? So the question is, well, how can different nutrients treat Alzheimer's? How can one do it and then a completely different one do it, right? So the answer, I think, lies in the blood-brain barrier. That is, choline can't get in because the blood-brain barrier is not working. Well, why is the blood-brain barrier not working? Maybe it's a tryptophan deficiency. All right, we'll go see that. Now we'll look at the foods on that. But the thing I'd like to point out is that palliative treatments, right, for a deficiency that we can feel, something like that in the brain, we give SSRIs for that. Palliative treatments then allow other tissues which have experienced problems with that same deficiency to go unnoticed, unobserved, and to degrade on faster. Okay, so how did we get in this situation? By the way, tryptophan goes to serotonin. Forgot to mention that. I hope you guys knew that. So that's why I brought up SSRIs. Now, there's also some cool news in that same study. They looked at normal mice. These are not Alzheimer's mice at all, but these are mice 2 years old and on the same diet at 2 years of age, these normal mice, right? These are young mice and those are old mice. The ones that were treated, their ability to distinguish between familiar and not and new was just as good as the as the young mice, right? Pretty cool. But even cooler, it's not too late, right? They were giving them, this is at 2 years of age, and that's an old mouse because they don't live that long. I think they live 2.5 years or something like that. 10 milligrams per kilograms for 14 days. Look at how they did, right? That's just taking a tryptophan supplement. All right, so why are we in this mess, I think? Okay, so let's look at the tryptophan ratings of high foods. And I won't go into what this is, but the reason it's not so simple is because tryptophan to get into the brain has to compete with other things to get in there. So that what's important is the ratio of tryptophan to these other compounds. Okay, you could eat something that's high in an absolute amount of tryptophan, but if the other ones are really high, then it's not going to make a difference. Okay, so that's the tryptophan rating. So what's highest? There's chia seeds are really high. Mozzarella cheese is high. We drop down whole wheat. I have to look at it this way. Tofu, quinoa, fish and meats are about, the rating's about half. Okay, aged cheese, it sort of spans fish and meats. All right, so here we have mozzarella and string cheese and regular cheese. And then when we pull in our diet cheeses, it drops more. Diet cheeses are the ones that are low fat, which we were told to eat, right? And then there's the really good one is yogurt, right? So yogurt is way down there, very, very low. Thanksgiving turkey? Turkey's in with the meats, but in with the meats were these bananas. Now, I have heard that there's some things that have tryptophan, that have melatonin in them. Bananas may have some tryptophan, but the protein in bananas is so low that it doesn't make a difference. But actually, you know what's really high in, according to the USDA database? What's really high in tryptophan rating is a Tootsie Roll. But but I think that's a mistake. But even if it isn't, there's no protein in that Tootsie Roll. So I had a friend, I said, he saw it. He said, you know what? He would deliver the newspaper in the morning. And so he'd get up at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. I don't know, something like that. He said, Guy, thanks. Now every morning when I get up, I eat a Tootsie Roll to get going. But to answer your question, what's Thanksgiving, what makes us sleepy is the fact that we just gorge and Well, well, it used to be that Chinese food was bad for you because of the MSG. That's not true either, right? And there's lots of other things, urban legends that come up. Let's see. Okay. I think there's one more thing here I'm supposed to throw in. Egg whites, they're also kind of low. So, if you threw away the yolk and just ate the white, you're actually doing yourself more harm than good, I think. All right, so let's go back then. So we see this cattle country, this is Tuscany with its 3 ecosystems. Just to review, the foods that they have are again, the Mediterranean omnivore diet. And I forgot to put wine in there, wine and vinaigrette dressing, fermented cheeses, things like that, right? So, looking at it and you say it's the Mediterranean diet, I don't think it's the vegetables that much. Yes, I'm going to get crucified by the vegetarians, but it's the fermented stuff, it's the eggs, it's the cheese. The thing about by the way, the thing about the eggs is that they were so popular that they developed a breed of chickens for them. Leghorn, you're familiar with Leghorn chickens? They're a layer chicken. Leghorn is actually the name for Livorno in Italy, which is a city in Tuscany, near Pisa, right beside Pisa. Right. Okay. All right. So time for questions. You guys have a few? Or? You can. Oh, yeah, good. A moment.
So my question is, what does a person who is allergic to eggs do for folate? Doesn't chia and
So, well, you can actually get choline supplements. There's lecithin is a good source of choline. Have you, no, okay, so yeah, that's what I would do. It's very simple. And or you could eat tripe, or liver, or liver.
Historically, fish has been touted as brain food. So that's what I've heard for centuries. Many years. Where does that fit nowadays?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. That's a great question. Fish are brain food. Omega-3s help us with what is called sequence memory. So you can remember long strings of things, short-term memory too. So they are brain food. They're not the only brain food. And that's what that slide with the 18 nutrients on there, that's what it shows you, is that we want to pick one thing and that's the silver bullet that's going to solve our problems. It's not like that. Even if you just get choline, I think you'll be smarter, but you'll be only smarter in a few ways. So there's like 9 intelligences. I forget the guy Gardner's name at one of those places. So there's 9 intelligences. To get them all 9, if you want all 9, you've got to be really well nourished, right? That's why maybe each of us only has 2 or 3 or something like that, right?
I've heard a lot about these, a lot of the over-the-counter medicines that are anti-cholinergic, like Benadryl and the overnight that help you sleep at night, and even some of the Zantacs and those things, and that it can help cause dementia. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, that the anti-cholinergic, that may very well be so, and yet they're so useful.
Well, here's the thing. If you can't sleep at night, what I didn't show in that slide, it went tryptophan to serotonin. Well, there's another step. It goes to melatonin. And if you can't sleep, it's one of the most common reasons is you don't have enough melatonin. So if you don't have that, you work your way back the biochemical pathway and you get to tryptophan. And that's the problem. That's why if you treat insomnia without, in ways other than fixing the nutritional problem, then you're going to get problems, I believe, in these other tissues. Did I explain it?
Well, it just seems like, from what I was reading here, is that anticholinergic effect is in a lot of over-the-counter medicines.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
And that if you avoid it, I do take melatonin, but sometimes I still can't sleep, so then I take the.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know. I mean, is that effect very, does it persist throughout your day? Or is it just a small period of time? I don't know. I'm not a physician, so I can't say. As someone who knows some physiology, I would say if it's only like for a short period of time, it's probably not causing it. But again, the problem is the underlying problem with, if it is lack of melatonin, right? I mean, the brain's really complicated. There's a balance of all sorts of things going on. So one of the best things that I think you can, that we know, we just won't do it because I'm just as bad as anybody else, is just exercise and, go out, and you don't have to run, you just go for a walk. But the other thing is, which in the longevity study, do you guys know that study at, there was in California, they did something like 15,000 people. And the thing they found was any activity was good for longevity. It didn't have to be aerobic or anything, even gardening. I think part of it is that this is what keeps us going. And using these is what keeps that thing in shape, right? So if you go like for a walk and you go on a nice paved trail, that's good. That's a good thing. But if you go on a trail with roots and everything like that, that's a nice challenge to your brain, right? And it's not gardening, but I think it's pretty good. Anyway, other questions?
Yeah, I didn't notice on the tryptophan ratings chart, whether there's something higher than number 8.
Was there something higher than number 8?
Yeah.
Well, there's Tootsie Rolls, but that's not, that's not what you want. But there actually is something higher. And it's strange. It's actually frozen spinach. Regular spinach, what's that? Frozen spinach. And so this comes back to true, right? Because you've got these, sometimes you have these artifacts where they pull something out. Well, so I was explaining this to this one guy and he says, well, that explains why my son, who is confined to a wheelchair, he doesn't like fresh spinach. He wants the frozen stuff. Because so exercise actually rectifies your balance of these amino acids because it's designed to burn off the trash, right? Why would the body working, burn off the good stuff? No, it's going to burn off the bad stuff, right? And so if you can't do that, like you're confined to a wheelchair, you have to try to, and the second thing is our brain actually can tell us what we need, right? Why does something sound good and then it tastes good? Because the subconscious brain knows what it's doing. It's had years to practice, right?
Where do supplements fit into this?
Supplements?
Supplements.
Anywhere you want. I mean,
Well, let me explain to you the supplements. So a lot of the foods that you said rely in
tryptophan.
someone with stage 3 kidney disease is supposed not to eat.
I can't understand you.
Stage 3 renal disease, if you read what kind of a diet you should have, half of what you said had this tryptophan. A person with kidney disease should not eat. So if that's the case,
I can't advise on
what supplements could someone look at to get the tryptophan without the foods that can be hard to keep. That makes sense?
Right, you'll have to ask a physician about that because I have no idea what's going on in kidney disease. Stage 3, even, yeah.
So we talked a little bit about supplements, and I want to throw in another perspective. In our group, bone health is also really, really important. And I was wondering if any of the foods, any of the nutritional information for brain health is also good for bone density.
For bone health, I mean, the only thing I read was that they did a study in women, and the osteoporosis was associated with the levels of chelators like oxalic acid, citric acid. So what that means is if you eat the wrong vegetables, if that's true, eating the wrong vegetables can give you osteoporosis. I don't know if that's true. That's what they're trying to show. So maybe that's why women get osteoporosis and men don't, right? Because we don't eat our vegetables. So how can we get osteoporosis? But I don't know. That was just one study, and it was just a correlation.
A question of use, the love digging into Italy and that region. Any other regions that you studied that you see the same kind of nutrition movement?
Yeah, I mean, I've got about 15 places in my book which I talk about. And I mean, you can explain a lot of things with this. You can explain Mesoamerica, the pyramid buildings. You can explain things like, well, I mentioned France. You can explain the Elizabethan era in England. They had an omega-3, which does sequence memory. So with sequence memory, you can remember music, literature, drama, things that extend over time. Spatial memory, like in the Renaissance, there was mostly it's space. And the reason they got it was Queen Elizabeth, she just added on to what some others have done, made them eat fish 3 days a week. And that's a lot of fish. Normally, back then you would eat fish once a week, but she made them eat fish 3 days a week because she needed sailors to man and fight the Spanish Armada. So it was interesting, shortly after, the year after they went to 3 fish days, William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, some of the two of the best, greatest British dramatists were born, right? Coincidence? Or is it like Giotto, after the day after that? So there's quite a few places like that. And the thing that you look for is, don't always look for a, boom across all the scales, because like the British, if you went and looked at British art, it just wasn't there, right? But they had the music, the drama, and literature, things like that, right? So, yeah.
A few weeks ago, 60 Minutes did a updated version of a study that we reported on Alzheimer's, and the investigators said that they know less now than they did before, that they were investigating the brains of the people, normal brains of people with Alzheimer's, when they died, and that there were normal brains with lots of plaque and brains with very little plaque. And they didn't associate that, I don't believe, with nutrition, but I don't have any comment.
No, I have not seen the results of that study. There's also, I don't know. My question, I'll go back to my question, is that maybe you should be looking at something else. And there's people that say that the problem is not the plaques. The plaques are the scar. What killed the cells that were there? And some people say it's an infection. Okay, so then what's getting across into the brain? Is it something, that's going into the brain, virus, but normally the virus, I forget which virus it was, they said, but normally viruses don't get into the brain. Very rarely do they get into the brain. So is it one specific type of virus, which they have to figure out now? If it's one specific virus, okay, I'll buy it. But if it's like several different types of microorganisms getting in there, then I think you got to go back and look at the blood-brain barrier, because that's the problem. Stuff is getting through there that shouldn't, and vice versa. Stuff that shouldn't get through is not. Or that should.
I just remembered all these commercials we've been seeing on TV a lot lately on Prevention. And
I don't.
it's over the counter, obviously, and I wonder if maybe it has tryptophan and choline in it. But I also wonder if it even really works anyway, just because they say it does, is no proof. And I wonder if you know anything about it.
I do not know anything about it. I'm sorry.
I'm trying something new. I'm going to try to have a person on Zoom ask me a question.
Okay, yeah.
If they can hear me, if they can tell me the question. No, I don't think they can hear me. Let's see.
Linda, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. When you were talking about tryptophan, you said something about the ratio of tryptophan being important. And my sound has been coming in and out, and I miss a few words. So I'm not exactly sure what you were saying about that.
She wants to know more about the tryptophan ratios that you were talking about. She said her mic went in and out and she had a hard time hearing some of that.
Oh, okay. So the tryptophan ratio. So tryptophan, to get through the blood-brain barrier, there's a specific portal for it and 9 other amino acids. So it has to compete with those other amino acids to get into the brain. It's an odds game. Okay, so you're trying to go through a gate, and the more of you that are there, the better the chance of getting through the gate. So to show that your chances of getting through the gate, of tryptophan getting through the gate, it's a division of the tryptophan by the concentration of all the other ones. Then, because that comes out to a fraction of like 0.0 something, I just multiply it by 100 to make it easy. So we're not dealing with decimals, and because you have to see, we're not used to dealing our minds with decimals. That's all. Okay.
What are you yourself doing and what are you having to close down?
Okay. I actually take omega-3s. I take alpha GPC. I just take 1 tablet, 1 a day. And I've actually started trying out methionine to see how that works. Okay. I eat mozzarella cheese, fish, fermented cheese, various types of vegetables. I eat meat, right? What I found is that even though you eat, I eat what I think is a really good diet, there's no substitute for physical activity. You have to go out, because I think what's going on is the muscles are actually our garbage incinerators, stuff which we can't excrete through the kidneys or through the bowels, exhale or whatever. We have to actually go through, it has to actually be burned up. Now maybe you would, well, I'll leave it at that. So nonetheless, with a really diet like this, I really don't have to do that much exercise to stay in shape. In fact, I don't gain weight. It's more to keep my blood pressure down. that's really why I exercise. So,
Any other questions? Anyone? Oh,
Diana, if you can unmute yourself, ask me and I'll ask the speaker.
Thank you. So my question was, you talked about the blood-brain barrier, the gut barrier, that membrane, all these membranes that protect and are selective in what they let enter or pass through this semi-permeable membrane idea. So wouldn't it, if you knew that there was a competition between these amino acids getting through and you were deficient in one particular one, wouldn't you eat it at a time where it could optimize its passage through that membrane? Let's say, like you just said, exercise. Now, doesn't exercise
Linda, I
generate?
hate to interrupt you, but I can't hear your question. I'm
Okay,
going to need to translate it.
Does exercise generate these precursors? Does it help, unlock the precursor to what its intended target is? The breakdown, you know what I'm talking about. You said chelated and then, or chelated, and then what is left of it is not enough, and then you have to add it from the other end. So does the body or brain understand, and that's why it craves food? And then you said exercise helps you burn off the garbage. So can you talk a little bit about burning off the garbage and how that is through the semi-permeable membrane and what's optimal time to do that? Do you have any idea?
What's the optimal time to exercise to maximize the transmission to nutrients in the brain? Is there a time of day, or do you have a recommendation, or what kind of exercises?
well, it might be optimal at 5 a.m., but I'm not getting up that early. I'd say for the vast majority of this, just do it whenever, it's easiest for you to do, because not doing it is way worse than doing it at the least optimal time. But haven't studied exercise physiology that much.
Okay, that's a fair response. But one other question, can I continue with that vein just for a moment? So you understand about B vitamins as generating, right? It's about nutrition. Is there anything about vitamins?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've seen some negative things. I didn't have, but they're negative in a sort of cool sort of way. So serotonin is the happiness hormone, but you get too much and you get too high. Okay, so what that is hypomania, maybe even mania, right? So I've seen people who have really took off with the mozzarella cheese, and they actually their libido went way up. And one guy, he and his girlfriend didn't leave the house for a week. Let me put it that way. So you have to be careful, and you become more impulsive. So it's called prodigality. So the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son who leaves, takes his inheritance and goes womanizing and drinking and spends all his money, right? That's prodigality. So it's also hypomania. You become impulsive as a spender and impulsive sexually. Okay, so that, I don't know, you might think that's okay, but I don't know. Generally not, though, generally not. And let's see, nothing else comes to mind. That's the big one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about Beretich quite some times, but haven't checked it out. And it's a chlorine, is its name, a chlorine. We've used it in the laboratory. It's a protein that binds calcium and actually gives off light, which is really handy if it's in the test tube. You can see how much calcium is.
I can't understand you. You have to.
Okay. Are we not on? No.
That's why. So wait a minute, start over slowly.
Prevention.
Okay,
Heard of it for improving memory. It's a chemical called quinine, which I'm familiar with in the lab. It's used to measure calcium release, and it gives off light, which is fun, which you can detect in a photometer. So anyway, it binds calcium, and the results of improving memory are equivocal. There was, the company said there were some subgroups that had improvement, but that overall, they found we're back to no health. The Prevention company got sued for misleading advertising and so on and so forth, but it makes a good story.
okay, all right. Well, I'm glad I didn't know anything about it.
It's a protein, and it's going to be digested amino acids.
The blood-brain barrier, okay. Thank you.
I think I'm going to call an end to the QA session. Thank you, Guy,
Okay.
for your presentation. And
All right. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the questions, really love it.
I'm going to pass around the basket. And once it's gone around the room, please give it to Chris. Do we have any? Are we meeting here next week? Or is it?
Next week is Zoom, right? And it's going to be our fall members meeting.
Oh, we better plan for
And
that.
so all show up on Zoom and learn about the state of the EHST society.
All right. Anything else?
Okay, I have questions to follow up with what John just said. So I would think even though it's a members meeting on Zoom next week, non-members are welcome to attend, right? Right. And you just said what about the fate of our society?
Well, that's what you learn.
The state of our society, not the fate.
Oh, I thought you said fate, and I'm going like, okay, I can't wait till next Sunday. Okay, thank you.
For a moment, Mary was very excited. Any other announcements? Do you have any announcements? All right.
The
Yes.
book. Could we have an announcement about the book reading, the book club?
Who is the book club officially?
No, I just brought this in to show to Gretchen and Dorothy. I'm reading it now, and it's not a novel.
The book group will meet on the 18th of November at 7 p.m. and we are going to talk about that'll be a Zoom meeting, yes.
Well, Mary, you're not doing the closing words?
Okay, so this is Dorothy's closing words. Get back in there. Okay, so this is a piece called Knowledge is Wealth. And it is written by first name Mohammed, last name is spelled Y-O-U-N-U-S. Knowledge is a human need, a spiritual need for perfection. Be he rich or poor, be he male or female, a human right that no one can take away. Acquire knowledge when you are in cradle. up to the day you go to the grave. Knowledge is the legacy of the prophets. We inherit from them knowledge divine, not material wealth, the wealth that goes with us to the other world. Spend of your wealth as much as you can. The more you spend of your knowledge, the more it gets increased. Gold might lose its value due to the market fluctuations, but not knowledge. Even the angels bow to the people of knowledge. Man of knowledge is a seer. Man without knowledge is a blind. And I don't know why she chose that for the talk on dementia, but it's interesting connections there.
Thank you, Mary, for standing in. Well, our meeting has ended, but the fellowship continues. So next week, we'll all meet on Zoom. Also next week, next Sunday is a board meeting. And so those board members, can you please send me any issues that you want to just bring up? Thank you.